ushers for taking up the offering this morning. If you're visiting with us, we're glad you're here. You don't have to feel obligated to contribute to the offering. It's just part of our worship that we do as a church family, and it's a blessing, actually, to be able to do so. It is great to see everybody. Oh, yeah, kids. I got to formally dismiss the kids, just because I prayed about it. So, kindergarten to grade 5. There's fun stuff waiting downstairs. So if you're in the sanctuary, go out that door where that guy just went, out that door, and make your way down the stairs. If you are a kid and you're in the gathering place, go out the double doors to that side and just follow the footsteps, and you'll get to where you're going. And a reminder to parents, if you've sent children down, make sure you collect the same number of children before you leave, okay? Because they get
number or the same kids?
Sorry?
The same number or the same kids?
Preferably the same kids, but I'll leave that up to you. Yeah, same number anyway. We don't want anyone straggling here. So, okay. Oh boy. Great to see everybody. Thank you for joining us this morning. And we're continuing our look at the Gospel of Luke. So if you've got a Bible and you want to get ready, you can turn to Luke 22. We're still in there. We started last week in that chapter. We've been in kind of a home stretch in the Gospel of Luke, looking at Jesus' final days on earth. And it's a gospel, so it's written in what's called narrative, right? It's telling a story, and it gets really tight and it speeds up towards the end. And so I feel like we're pausing to look moment by moment, but I don't want us to miss anything in this really, really crucial part of the story. So last week we looked at the first part of Luke 22. And you might remember, or if you weren't here with us last week, we looked at how Jesus and his disciples were eating the Passover meal together. They were celebrating Passover, which on one hand, for Jewish people, that would have been a normal, regular, kind of familiar, traditional thing for them to do. But we saw how Jesus, he took those familiar things and he says, I'm giving these symbols new meaning. And he introduced what we call the Lord's Supper, saying, basically taking the bread and taking the cup and transforming them, saying these are symbols now that recognize and celebrate and remember the new covenant that God was bringing in, the new arrangement between a holy God and his imperfect people. So no longer are we under the old covenant where God says these are all the rules, and if you keep them, you'll be blessed, and if you break them, well, He'll allow us to make sacrifices to cover it up, but there's a constant striving to be righteous under the law, and the new covenant is different. It's fulfilled, the righteousness is fulfilled in Christ. So now our righteousness before God comes from faith in Jesus and his perfect keeping of the law. So this new covenant is celebrated in the Lord's Supper, and we took communion last week, and we're seeing how Jesus was unpacking all of this. And then at the end of the passage that we were looking at last week, Jesus then drops a bit of a bombshell on his disciples, as if it wasn't enough for him to say, you know Passover that you've been familiar with from the time you were just a tiny person? It's different now. Oh, and by the way, one of you is going to betray me. He's sitting there with his closest followers, and he tells them that one of them is going to actually betray him. And that led to this sort of shock and this discussion of who is going to do that. We jump in right on the heels of that, looking at Luke 22, verses 24. We're going to look at 24 to 34 today, but just the first 4 verses. It says, a dispute also arose among them, among the disciples, as to which of them was to be regarded as the greatest. And he said to them, the kings of the Gentiles exercise lordship over them, and those in authority over them are called benefactors. But not so with you. Rather, let the greatest among you become as the youngest, and let the leader as one who serves. For who is greater, the one who reclines at the table or the one who serves? Is it not the one who reclines at the table? But I am among you as one who serves. So, the whole thing we're going to look at this week, I think, as we go through this passage, it's a reminder which can be discouraging, but I think if we follow it, it becomes encouraging. And that's that people we're created in the image of God. We're dearly loved by God. We're not as awesome as we think we are, generally speaking. We are weaker than we think. So here we have when we look at this story, and it's familiar to us as part of our Easter celebrations and the whole tradition that goes along with that, we can look at this and kind of think, man, these disciples, how dense were these guys? They didn't get it. They're here in this momentous moment, and now they're arguing about this. But I think if we think about it for a second, they didn't know this was a momentous moment. We see it as tradition. This is brand new for them. But they were just told that one of them was going to betray Jesus. And so this discussion among the disciples about which one of us was going to betray Jesus pretty quickly turned into a discussion about who clearly wouldn't. And I think we can see how it would get there, right? If you're one of the disciples, you're sitting there and it's like one of you is going to betray me. And you're thinking to yourself, well, I don't want to do that. I don't think it wouldn't be me. Because it's not going to be me. Well, maybe it's, right? And so in trying to almost defend oneself, or to, even if you're trying to be honest, well, I would never do that. And this is just the other side of the same coin. They're quickly trying to establish the pecking order, right? Who clearly wouldn't betray Jesus? Which one of them was the least likely to betray Jesus? Which one was the most faithful, the most loyal, the most committed disciple? How did they stack up? Humans are really good at that, right? We get in a group, and we will figure it out. However that status is supposed to work. So they were doing that. They wanted to see who was to be regarded as the greatest among them. I think that's an important word. They're not saying straight up who's the greatest among us, but who would be regarded that way. Because isn't that what it's all about? It's about image, right? It's about how we are perceived. We want, I think, as humans, to be perceived as, if not the greatest, is at least pretty good, right? Maybe better than someone else, so at least we're okay, we're at least kind of admirable. And I think some of this comes down to our wiring. Some of us are like, no, I don't want to be admirable, I want to be the best. We tend to do that. And here in this moment, they're being humans. And we have all kinds of examples of this kind of in the world, right? We can think of people who are self-promoters, who are, I'm the greatest, and there's lots of examples of it. And it's not always disreputable, right? If it happens amongst a friend group, someone's bragging all the time, that kind of gets old. But we celebrate this, or at least tolerate it as a culture, don't we? It's very common amongst politicians, amongst business leaders, amongst pro athletes, amongst hip-hop artists, amongst all kinds of people who have a podium. They're constantly telling anyone who will listen, and even those who don't want to, that they're the best, certainly better than the competition, whoever you'd be comparing them to, right? They're the ones that have it together, they're the ones that can offer what they're looking for, they're the greatest. Now, some of us are a little more wired that way than others, but we know as Christians we're not supposed to do that, right? So if I was to say, how many of you lead like that? How many of you, right? You would know. I'm not putting my hand up for that. That's a trap. I don't do that, right? We know we're not supposed to pursue our own glory and our own kingdom. We're disciples of Christ. We pursue His kingdom. But the thing is, these were disciples of Christ too. They weren't arguing about whose kingdom it would be, right? Yeah, it's Jesus. He's the greatest. But within that kingdom, who's the best? And I think sometimes as Christians, we can be tempted this way, and then we can kind of sanctify it by saying, well, I don't want to be the greatest. I don't want my own kingdom, but if I'm honest, I would like to be considered pretty great in the kingdom of God. I want to be seen as more spiritually mature, more successful in ministry, a better Christian parent or Christian spouse, or someone who is, gifted. I want to be seen as the most humble. Right? Think about that for a second. But we go there. Maybe not honestly, but I think our mind, we won't be honest with ourselves, but I think we are tempted to desire to be seen as great even within the kingdom. Jesus counters this, right? And he tells them, look, we see examples of that. When he says, the kings of the Gentiles exercise lordship over them. Gentiles in this context, it's not an ethnic thing. He's not saying, well, this is what the non-Jewish people do. This is kingdom language. The people who aren't people of God, humans just left to their own devices, seeking their own good. This is what they do. And humans, I think, at all times and all places have had experience of this. Human leaders do this. They exercise lordship over the people that they are in authority over. They want to hold on to their position. And he says those in authority over them are called benefactors, or the verb tense of it could be like those who are in authority over them, like they want to be called. They make themselves be called benefactors. And we see that, right? I mean, it's almost comical in more authoritarian regimes, where the authoritarian dictator of the people, whose word is law, right, whom everyone fears, how do they want to be described? What is the title that they give themselves, right? It's usually like great leader, great provider. I'm a benefactor. I'm helping all of you. I bring good things, and you all better say it now after me, or else that I am. We want to be seen as helpful, but we'll put the words in other people's mouths if we have to. He says we know what that looks like. That's the way the world does it. He goes, I want you to do it differently. Not so with you. And he gives this, once again, an example of how the kingdom that he is bringing in is upside down to our reckoning. He says, the one who's greatest, you need to act like, he says, become as the youngest. Now, we can easily misunderstand that, because in our culture, we tend to worship youth. We glorify looking young, and as we get older, we will invest all kinds of time, effort, and money into looking like we're not getting older, right? Because heaven help us if we become old. And I think most times of human history we understood that older people are to be venerated and respected. Certainly in this culture, there was a sense in which if you were in a gathering, in a family, in a group, at dinner, the oldest person in the room was just naturally accorded a degree of respect. They've gained some wisdom, they've got some miles on them, and we know you can get old and not get wise, but at least you've gained some experience, right? If you survived this long. And so, but Jesus is saying, listen, instead of acting like the person who should be accorded the most respect, you're going to become like the youngest. Because again, in cultures like this, the youngest person in the room, the young people were generally understood and expected to say less and serve more, right? You serve and keep your ears open and learn something. Personally, I think that's great. We should bring that back. Now that I'm not a young person anymore, I'm like, that. We need to do that. Okay. But Jesus says, that's the position we're supposed to adopt. And you notice he says, rather, let the greatest among you come as the youngest. He doesn't deny that in some sense there is the greatest among us. He is not saying, and there's kind of an element in our society now that wants to deny differences. Right? We're all the same. Everything's the same. Jesus isn't saying, hey, in my kingdom you're all the same. We are, in a sense. But he's recognizing the reality that, you know what, there are some people who are more mature in the faith. There are some people whose lives exhibit a greater degree of obedience to Christ, who exhibit the gifts of the Spirit more than others. Ideally, we're all moving that way. But he says, listen, the one who is legitimate, if you have a legitimate claim to being greater in the kingdom, don't go around acting like, well, that's right, you all better just honor me. Remember who you're talking to, hang on my every. He says, no, you're to act, you are to seek to be humble and the one who serves. That is the way we are supposed to. It's the way we're supposed to lead. John's gospel records that at this moment, in this meal, Jesus actually washed the disciples' feet. It's a well-known passage in John. Is it John 13 or 16? I have it in your notes. And many of you are familiar with that passage, right? After they've eaten the meal, Jesus, quite clearly the guest of honor, gets up, changes his clothes, takes on the whole, he does the job that the lowest of the servants should do, right? Certainly not the guests. Like he says, who's greater? The ones who are reclining at the table, the ones who are eating the meal, or the ones that are serving? We understand socially, the ones that are dining are better than, they are greater than, they are accorded more respect than the servers. The servers are just there to serve. Jesus gets up from the place of honor and sort of moves himself over into the servant side. And then even among the servants, there's like a pecking order, right? If you were a servant, but you were the one serving the drinks, top of the heap, you're like the shift manager, right? It goes all the way down. The one washing the feet, I don't bottom rung, right? And Jesus goes and voluntarily takes that bottom spot. And we read in John, the disciples like, especially Peter, right? No, I'm not comfortable with this. Jesus is saying, I'm showing you something here. Jesus said he puts himself as the one who serves. Luke's gospel has Jesus alluding to this. And we're to copy Jesus, and we're to seek humility, seek to put others ahead of ourselves. That's actually evidence that you are growing greater in the kingdom. So they're fighting out who's going to be greatest. Jesus says you have it upside down. Then we come to this middle couple of verses, and they're a bit of a puzzle. They're kind of a transition. But Jesus continues to talk, and in verse 28 he says, "You are those who have stayed with me in my trials, and I assign to you, as my Father assigned to me, a kingdom, that you may eat and drink at my table in my kingdom, and sit on thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel." This sounds weird to most of us, I think. I suspect it's one of those things that would have made more sense to a first century Jewish ear, because he's using language and concepts that shows up, especially in places like Daniel 7, when they're thinking about the coming kingdom. So big picture, Jesus is basically saying, listen, you're fighting about who's going to be the best. You're acting like the world. You don't have to do that. Actually, you can seek the lowest place because you don't have to compete to get into the kingdom. The 12 didn't have to worry that they would miss out if they didn't promote their own interests. Jesus isn't going, yeah, you know what? I've been given the kingdom and I've got 3 job openings. I have 12 applicants. Figure it out, guys. Right? It's a competitive internship. He doesn't say that. They're acting like that. He goes, no, listen, I've been given the kingdom. I've been assigned it to me. It's as good as done. And I'm going to assign it. I'm going to give it to you. And Jesus is using language of covenant language, to assure them that their place in the kingdom is secure. As I said, his wording calls to mind Daniel chapter 7, how the Son of Man would be given the kingdom, and the saints of the Most High would receive the kingdom forever and ever. I encourage you, I think I have it in your notes, to read Daniel 7. Daniel's a weird book. If you haven't read it, it's apocryphal, right? It's visions of the future. There's a lot of symbolic language. Only some of it is interpreted. But in this chapter, right, he's seeing this vision of essentially kings that exalt themselves against God and have great authority, but he sees that they'll ultimately come to ruin. Their kingdom is going to be torn down and consumed. And who ends up with the authority? The one like a son of man is given it, and he gives the kingdom to the saints. And this idea of when he says you'll sit on thrones judging the 12 tribes, that's not like sitting there like acting judgmental. It's that it's to rule. It's a position of authority. He says, you 12, you're in already. His words were challenges to his followers to once again look beyond this life, right? The short view. What about the kingdom? He's like, no, listen. I'm bringing in something that is bigger and eternal, and it's been promised, and it doesn't require the kind of striving that position in this world takes. Because, of course, you got to fight to get on top, and then once you're on top, you got to fight to stay there, right? Because who's everyone shooting at? The one on top. Everyone wants to be the king of the hill. He says it's not like that. But he's telling them that their faithfulness to Jesus during his earthly ministry would be rewarded with positions of authority in the kingdom of heaven. Now, a question that I asked, and I kept it in my notes because I think it's helpful. Does this apply to us as well? This is a specific context. He's talking to the 12 apostles. We know that our lives are not exactly parallel to them. Our call is not exactly parallel to theirs. But I will say that I think this applies to us in that if we too are staying faithful to Jesus in our trials, as we continue to stay faithful to him, our place in the kingdom of heaven is secure. Not secured on the basis of our awesomeness, thankfully. It's not secured by grasping for greatness. We only get in at all by grace. And by that grace, we are kept. In a bit of an ironic twist, that grace that we are given, when it starts to show up in our lives, the evidence of that is lives of humility. So if you see someone who is like, I'm a Christian and I have faith in Christ and I'm the best, I am so faithful, I am so spiritual, I am so humble, you all had better just follow me. It's like, you can have some sympathy and grace for that person. They might be in the kingdom, but they are like, they've still got the training wheels on. They haven't figured out. It's like you've maybe got enough grace to know that you need grace to get into the kingdom, but you're acting so arrogant that it's apparent that that grace has done very little work in your heart yet. They'll get there. Just be patient with them, right? But isn't it backwards? Because in that person's mind, it's like, I am so there. Would you all just catch up and follow me? That tends to not be what a spiritually mature person sounds like. They tend to be humble. They tend to be Christ-like. Where am I in my notes? Right. So we don't have to worry about trying to impress anyone. Then we come to this third part, where we are reminded that we're just weaker than we think. Like, people can do awesome stuff. People are not probably as awesome as they think they are. We read in verse 31. It's Jesus still speaking, and he says, Simon, Simon, behold, Satan has demanded to have you, that he might sift you like wheat. But I have prayed for you that your faith may not fail. And when you have turned again, strengthen your brothers. Peter said to him, Lord, I'm ready to go with you both to prison and to death. Jesus said, I tell you, Peter, the rooster will not crow this day until you deny 3 times that you even know me. This is a sobering passage. It's a well-known part of the story. Even people who are only kind of, I went to church as a kid at Easter, and like some little Peter, rooster, right? Like we know it. It's part of the story. These are sobering words. Though their place in the kingdom is secure, there were going to be trials that would come. And Jesus wanted them to be prepared, right? He just got done talking about how, hey, listen, you guys don't need to worry. You don't need to strive with each other for greatness. Look, I've been assigned the kingdom. I'm going to assign it to you. So there's a sense of being able to rest in that. But he doesn't want them to think, okay, so does that mean we can just coast? Like it's just going to be smooth sailing from here on in, and then awesomeness in the kingdom. It's like we can rest in him, but there are trials and temptations and trouble that comes in this life. For these guys specifically, it was going to get very dark very quickly, and they didn't know, and Jesus is giving them the heads up. And Jesus singles out Simon Peter here. And that could be because Peter sometimes speaks as the representative for the group, sometimes he's spoken to that way. That could be what's going on. I wonder if part of it is because Simon Peter was probably, this is me making some speculation on scripture, so if you're like, I don't think that, this is not what it says, this is what I think it might imply. When they're talking about who's greatest in the kingdom, I think Peter was probably making a strong case for himself. It's like, look, all of you disciples, who went up on the mountain with him? Right? Peter, James, and John. John's a softie, right? So it's Peter and James. Clearly it's me, right? Like Peter's like, I think I'm the guy. He was probably making a strong case for it. Maybe some of the others were thinking, well, maybe I don't think I'm going to betray Jesus, but certainly I won't be as great as Peter. I wonder if somewhere after Jesus talks about the kingdom that is going to be assigned to them, they're going to sit on 12 thrones judging the 12 tribes of Israel. If Peter said something or just communicated in his body language a sense of maybe feeling pretty worthy of that position, it's like, yeah, that's right. My throne's going to be biggest. I just wonder. But Jesus speaks to him, and he's speaking gently, but he's speaking seriously. And he tells him, Satan has demanded to have you, that he might sift you like wheat. There's a lot to unpack there. Again, we see Satan's involvement behind the scenes. It's like Jesus can see him, and the rest of the disciples, it's like, well, we assume, but we don't know. We don't have that kind of perception. And we see once again that Satan is powerful, but Satan has limits. without trying to be trite, I think what we see here is a description of the devil doing paperwork. Satan had to apply for permission to access one of the disciples, right? I would like to have access to Simon Peter. You can see here I'm going to sift him like wheat. I want to do it, but he had to ask, right? He did. Jesus doesn't say, Simon, be careful, because try as we might, I don't think I can stop Satan from getting a hold of your life and shaking things up. He says, no, Satan's demanded. He's asked, right? One commentator I was reading, this wasn't their point, but it struck me. I had to get up and go get a coffee. But he said, Satan prayed to be able to tempt Peter. Satan prayed. Technically, he was talking to God. He was making a request of God. Dear God, can I please tempt Peter? What is going on here? It's strange, but we do see that he is asking. Satan was praying for Peter. But Jesus says, I was praying for you too. Jesus was praying for you too. It's interesting that Satan's prayer seems to have been answered. Just wrap your cerebral cortex around that for a second. Satan seems to have been granted permission to sift Peter, to test him, to shake him in order to reveal what was really there. Jesus says, I prayed for you. But you'll note Jesus doesn't say, listen, Peter, I need to level with you. Okay? Satan asked for permission to shake you, to see if your faith is as strong as you think it is. Don't worry. I've prayed for you. Now, if I was Peter, if I was in that situation, I'd be like, you prayed that his application would be denied, right? And Jesus is like, no, I've prayed that when you're shaken, your faith will hold on. It's like, what? You said yes? Like he asked, and you gave him the go-ahead on that? Like what? When does this start? What is going on? Do I need to be prepared? What is wheat? What is, right? Jesus is like, I pray for you that your faith will not fail. Jesus does not guarantee. In fact, this is one of these plain examples where God in his goodness allows trial, allows trouble, allows Satan access to, not unlimited access, right? I'm sure there were pages and pages. You'll see there in subsections, so you know I won't fill in and I won't. But it's clearly laid out here. I'm going to sift him like wheat. You don't eat the wheat, right? When you said, no, I'm just, right? There's limits. It's all worked out. We don't see it. But God is not being unkind. He's not being forgetful. Satan didn't sneak around him. It's not that Satan was trying to get at the disciples and Jesus is like, none shall pass. And Satan somehow overpowered him. And God, it's like, no. He had to apply. There's a process. And he did it, and we've granted certain access. That is contrary to many of our felt theology. We're like, no, if I love Jesus and trust him, he won't let any bad things happen to me. Well, we tend to define bad things as uncomfortable things, and that is absolutely the opposite of what Jesus promises. Uncomfortable things will happen. It's actually important for us. But here we have Jesus saying, I've prayed for you that your faith will not, that it will stand the test, that it will fail. Interestingly, and I might have passed it, except 3 different commentaries I was reading mentioned this. In the grammar, because in English we don't have we have the word you, but that can mean one person or multiple persons. We don't have the tu and vous like our French friends. In Greek, he says, Peter, Satan has asked to sift you, individual. But I have prayed for all y'all that all of your faith will stand the test. It switches to plural. And so there is a sense that it's not just saying, we know all of the disciples are going to face trial. We know that they don't end up doing very good at it. And I think this applies to us as well. I would have preferred to hear Jesus saying, I've prayed for you that you won't face trial. But we know that our life of faith does face trials. Our faith is tested. And the thing is, that's good. Because it's genuineness, it's strength, it's untested, it's unproven. We don't even know. We can think it's great, or maybe we think, oh no, it's not. We don't know, though, until we're tested, until it's met with some resistance, right? There's so many parallels to our physical strength and our physical health. So, and this is probably more stereotypically true of young males. I'm strong, right? They've started to grow, they're getting hair and muscles and smells in places, and they're like, I'm strong, like I'm a beast, right? But it's like they don't really know. They can strut and posture, but things get quiet when you're like, okay, well, here's a barbell, and it's got 300 pounds on it. Deadlift that bad boy. You're strong. Oh, I don't have to prove anything to you. It's like, but do you have to prove anything to you? Like, can you lift it or not, right? Like, it's like, and if you approach the bar and you get down there, you're all, and you're sweating and the veins are popping out and nothing happens, it's like, okay, you've learned something. You might be strong, but you're not that strong. You've met with resistance, and there's limits where, oh, I can lift it a little bit, but dang, that's heavy. Oh, okay, right? And then we have all kinds of choices. I'm going to give up lifting. I'm going to be a musician. Or it's like, I'm going to keep practicing, and I'm going to get stronger to the point where, oh, I can do 300. Oh, I can do 450. Look at me. That's awesome. You're strong, right? Our faith, though, is we can't test it the same way. What do we lift with our faith? Our faith, the resistance we face it's much more subtle. It's temptation. It's all of the doubts. It's the trials that come along because we are Christians. It is a unique set of resistance that I firmly believe people who are not in the kingdom, people of the world that are just doing whatever, they don't face these kind of things, right? They're on the slow, easy, broad road that leads to destruction. And there's very few speed bumps or anything, right? But when you start climbing the narrow road, you want to live this life of faith, there are trials. So was Jesus' prayer for the disciples answered? I think that depends on how we scored it. On the surface, we could be like, well, it doesn't look like it, right? Because we know, spoiler alert, people, if you've not read this, read the rest of the Gospel of Luke, okay? But Jesus gets arrested, and the disciples run away like scared bunnies. Peter, who's like, I will go to prison and death, he does exactly what Jesus says, right? He denies even knowing it. He is bullied and intimidated out of his faith by a servant girl. We're going to get there. I don't want to steal the thunder of the coming messages, but so it looks in a sense like they fail, but bigger picture, taking the longer view, his faith grows. Peter famously, tragically, in this moment where he's talking with Jesus, does not see the truth of his position. Jesus says, I've prayed for you. And Peter's almost like, pray for me? You mean pray for these jokers? Because I've got this. I'll go with you to jail. What are they going to do? Lock you up? I'm there. Are they going to kill you? I will go to death. There's nothing they can say or do that will scare me enough that I'll abandon you. Right? He's full of bravado. He's full of confidence. And I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. I can't even say that phrase. The benefit of the doubt. And say, I think he believed that of himself. Right? But that's untested faith. This is the young guy strutting around. I can live that. I can live more than all of you guys. Right? And Jesus is going, hold on, let me just rack some plates here. We're about to find out what's what. It's going to get heavy, Peter. Peter doesn't see it. He's declaring that he's going to resist, overcome any of these fearful things. And Jesus pushes back, kindly but firmly, and tells him how it's actually going to go. It's one of the few times in the Gospels where Jesus makes a predictive statement about the future, and in direct, non-illustrative, non-parable terms. This isn't a let he who has ears let him hear kind of thing. He's saying, straight up, I'm going to tell you what's going to happen, like in the next 12 hours. Peter, before the rooster crows tomorrow morning, it's getting to be nighttime right now. Before the rooster crows in the morning, you are going to deny that you even know me, and you're going to repeat it for clarity 3 times. So I'll go to jail. You won't, Peter. You're not even going to go to jail. You are going to save your skin. You're going to distance yourself from me. That's what's going to happen. He just lays it out for him. And I don't think that was Jesus just taking him down a peg in front of the guys. I think this is Jesus giving Peter something to hang on to. Because not only does Jesus know what Peter's going to say in the courtyard when he's confronted, hey, You're a Galilean. Were you with him? I'm sure this guy was with him too. I don't know what you're talking about. Jesus knows that's coming, but he knows what's coming afterwards. And the Gospels tend to sum it up very succinctly. Peter went and wept bitterly. Jesus knew, though, the dark, smothering, just the bitter darkness that is going to swallow Peter after he denies knowing Jesus. As his self-doubt crashes down and as this takes a chainsaw to his pride, Jesus knows the hole Peter's going to be. He's aware, Peter, that's the sifting, man. The sifting isn't the slave girl going, I think this guy was with Jesus too. It's afterwards, after you've fallen, and you're there, and Satan is whispering and shouting, and you look in the mirror and your own thoughts condemn. There is no way I can be forgiven now. I have gone too far. I have taken the fatal step. I have denied even knowing my friend. Everything that I've said turned out to be false. There is no way that I can be forgiven and restored. I'm not worthy. Even if he offered to, I couldn't possibly take it because after everything I said, after all of my boasting, in the face of the slightest little resistance, right? And Jesus knows what he's going to be facing. He knows how dark that's going to get. That's the sifting. And he gives him something to hold on to, because Peter's certainly going to remember Jesus' words. It says, right? Peter denies him, and then the rooster crowed again. Peter remembered what Jesus says. And it's like the whole house of cards of his built-up greatness in the kingdom comes down. But Jesus wants him to remember what he said right before that. What did he say right before that? He told him, and when you have turned again, go and strengthen your brothers. You notice when Jesus said that, Peter it's like he didn't pick up on it, right? He jumps right to the, pray for me, no, I'm not going to. And Jesus is saying, when you've turned again, if he noticed that, maybe he would have been like, turned again, what does it mean? It sounded almost, Jesus, and I know you couldn't have meant this because it's me you're talking about, but it almost sounded like you're saying, I'm going to turn away from you, but then after I turn back, then I can go and strengthen. And of course, we know that's not going to happen because I would never turn away from you. I could probably maybe you mean my brothers who turn away, I'll strengthen them after. But Jesus said what he said, and he wants Peter to have something to hold on to. Peter, you're going to turn, but after you turn back to me, after you get back up, then I want you to go and strengthen your brothers. I want you to actually serve with what you now have after that process. I want you to strengthen your brothers. See, Peter's denial would not cast him away irretrievably. It wouldn't even render him useless, right? Maybe I could come back to the prodigal son. I'm not worthy to be called your son, but maybe I could be a hired man. Peter wasn't like, okay, you can get forgiven, but you're not even part of the 12. You can wash the feet, Peter. It's like, no, Peter, you've got a role to play now. You're going to strengthen your brothers in a way, ironically, you thought you could do before, but you couldn't until after. But now that you've gone through this trial, coming through the trial, learning his own need for grace and God's eagerness to give it, that will allow him to serve his brothers like someone who is actually becoming great in the kingdom. People are weaker than we think. All of these apostles were weaker than we think, and it includes us as well. We are. But fortunately for us, under this new covenant that Jesus says he's bringing in, and we know his death was more than just a political assassination. It was the sacrifice for our sins. This new covenant and our place in the kingdom does not depend on our strength. Yes, we're weaker than we think. No, we can't lift that without much. And eventually we can lift, but any strength we have is grace. It's all the grace of God. It seems that a flawless performance is not required to pass the tests of our faith. What's required is a getting back up. Understanding that the grace allows us to get back up. If we don't understand his grace when we get knocked down, we might think we're out. That's it, one strike and we're out. But if we understand his grace and we get back up, we are not only accepted and restored to good standing with God, but we find ourselves, like Peter, in a position to actually strengthen our brothers and sisters in the midst of their struggles, because the struggles will come. Let's pray. Lord, we thank you. We thank you for this story. And while all Scripture is God-breathed, it feels like we are on maybe exceptionally hallowed ground as we approach the story of your trial and your death. Lord, I pray that familiarity would not blind us to the truth of your word today, but as we think about what the disciples said and how they were acting in their view of themselves right before everything hits the fan, that we would look at ourselves clearly and soberly, that you would give us eyes to see. Lord, if any of us are in the spot where we're tempted to think we're pretty great, Lord, I pray that you would give us eyes to see that we are not as strong as we think. Our need of you is huge. Our ability to get by on our own, that's an illusion. And Lord, if there are those who are all too clearly aware of their weakness and their failures, and there are those who are in that dark place that Peter experienced, all too aware of their sins yet again, and having continually fallen short. They are facing the temptation to believe in your grace and not possibly forgive someone like them again. Not after what they did, not that last time, not after what they said and the promises they made. Lord, I pray that you would speak to them in that darkness. And that you encourage them to get back up. And after they have turned, to strengthen their brothers and sisters. Lord, we thank you for the grace that we need, and that you are just so ready through the personal work of Christ to dump it just abundantly pour it to us. I pray that we would be people that are shaped by that grace. In Jesus' name.